Kamala Harris's economic plan versus Newsom's budget. The 2026 California Showdown introduction. As California approaches the 2026 gubernatorial election, speculation about potential candidates and their policy platforms is intensifying. One hypothetical yet compelling scenario is a face-off between Vice President Kamala Harris and incumbent Governor Gavin Newsom, whose term will end due to term limits. Harris, with her national profile and California roots, could leverage her experience to propose a bold economic plan centered on green energy, affordability, and social equity. Meanwhile, Newsom's proposed $322 billion state budget for 2025 to 26, with $228.9 billion in general fund spending, reflects his administration's priorities, balancing fiscal stability with investments in education, housing, and climate resilience. This analysis compares Harris's hypothetical 2025 economic proposals for a gubernatorial run with Newsom's budget, focusing on green energy, affordability, voter implications, and expert insights. It also explores the political dynamics of a 2026 showdown, drawing from web sources, policy debates, and California's economic challenges. Kamala Harris's hypothetical economic plan for 2025. Background on Harris's political profile. Kamala Harris, born in Oakland, California, has deep ties to the state. Her career as a prosecutor, California Attorney General, 2011 to 2017, U.S. Senator, 2017 to 2021, and Vice President, 2021-present, positions her as a formidable candidate for governor. While Harris has not publicly confirmed a 2026 run, her national prominence and progressive credentials make her a speculated contender. Her economic plan, as imagined for a gubernatorial campaign, would likely build on her federal policy experience, emphasizing green energy, affordability, and equity. Issues resonant with California voters, key components of Harris's hypothetical plan. Green energy leadership. Harris has consistently championed climate action. As vice president, she supported the Inflation Reduction Act, 2022, which allocated billions for renewable energy and emissions reduction. For a 2025 gubernatorial run, Harris might propose massive investment in renewable energy, a plan to expand solar, wind, and hydrogen projects, aiming for 100% clean electricity by 2035, aligning with California's climate goals but accelerating implementation. Green Jobs Initiative, a program to create 500,000 green jobs by 2030, focusing on training programs for underserved communities. This could include partnerships with community colleges and unions to build a clean energy workforce. Transportation electrification, expanding electric vehicle, EV. Infrastructure, with subsidies for low-income households to purchase EVs and a push for electrified public transit in urban areas like Los Angeles and San Francisco. Climate Equity Fund, a dedicated fund to support disadvantaged communities disproportionately affected by pollution, offering grants for clean energy projects and home retrofitting, affordability and economic equity. California's high cost of living, particularly housing, is a top voter concern. Harris's plan might include housing affordability, streamlining the California Environmental Quality Act, (CEQA), to expedite housing construction, coupled with $10 billion in state bonds for affordable housing. This aligns with Newsom's recent efforts but could emphasize denser urban development. Tax relief for middle and low-income families, expanding the Earned Income Tax Credit, EITC, and introducing a state-level child tax credit to offset living costs. Healthcare access, building on Medi-Cal's expansion, Harris might propose fully funded continuous eligibility for children and adults, countering Newsom's proposed Medi-Cal cuts. Small business support. Tax incentives for small businesses adopting green practices, paired with grants to help them recover from economic disruptions like tariffs or wildfires. Education and workforce development. Harris's plan could prioritize education as a pathway to economic mobility, tuition-free community college, expanding Newsom's tuition-free community college program to include workforce training in green technologies. Universal pre-K, a push for universal preschool, addressing childcare shortages and supporting working families. STEM and green tech training, investments in STEM education to prepare students for careers in renewable energy and technology. Political framing. Harris's plan would likely be framed as a bold, progressive vision to make California a global leader in green innovation while addressing affordability. She might contrast her forward-looking approach with Newsom's, critiquing his reliance on reserve funds and incremental reforms. However, her plan's ambitious spending could face scrutiny over fiscal feasibility, especially given California's volatile revenues and recent deficits. Gavin Newsom's 2025-26 California Budget Overview of the budget. Governor Newsom's proposed 2025-26 budget totals $322.2 billion, with $228.9 billion in general fund spending and nearly $17 billion in reserves. After 2 years of deficits, including a $45 billion shortfall in 2024, the budget projects a modest $363 million surplus, driven by stronger-than-expected revenues from a robust economy and stock market. Key features include fiscal stability, withdrawing $7.1 billion from reserves to balance the budget, while maintaining $11 billion in the rainy day fund and $4.5 billion in discretionary reserves. Spending reductions, eliminating 6,500 vacant state positions, $1.2 billion savings, and cutting operational costs like travel and IT, $3.5 billion savings. Core program investments, maintaining funding for education, $118.9 billion for K-14 via Proposition 98, housing, healthcare, and climate programs, with no major new investments. Climate and wildfire resilience, $1.5 billion from a voter-approved climate bond for wildfire prevention and forest health, plus $200 million annually through 2028 to 29 for fire prevention projects. Green energy and climate priorities. Newsom's budget emphasizes climate resilience but takes a more cautious approach than Harris's hypothetical plan. Wildfire and forest resilience, $4 billion total for wildfire prevention, including fuel breaks, prescribed burns, and 16 new helicopters. Cap-and-trade reauthorization, proposing to extend the cap-and-trade program to 2045, with $1.5 billion annually for firefighting and $1 billion for high-speed rail. Delta Conveyance Project, streamlining a controversial water diversion project to enhance climate adaptation, though this faced legislative pushback. Unlike Harris's focus on aggressive renewable energy expansion, Newsom's climate investments prioritize immediate needs like wildfire response over long-term green energy transitions. Critics argue this approach lacks ambition, while supporters praise its pragmatism given fiscal constraints. Affordability measures. Newsom's budget addresses affordability indirectly: housing, $620 million in tax credits and loans for affordable housing, plus $300 million for first-time homebuyers. Education, stable K-14 funding and tuition-free community college, but an 8% cut to UC and CSU, $772 million combined, raising concerns about access and quality. Healthcare, maintaining Medi-Cal expansion but proposing cuts like ending coverage for GLP-1 drugs, e.g., Ozempic, and imposing premiums for undocumented adults, sparking controversy. Challenges and criticisms. Newsom's budget has drawn criticism for Medi-Cal cuts. Proposals to freeze enrollment for undocumented adults and impose $30 to $100 monthly premiums starting in 2026 to 27 were opposed by Latino legislators and health advocates, who argue they target vulnerable populations. Insufficient housing investment. Despite $100 million for encampment cleanup and $500 million for homelessness in 2026 to 27, critics say Newsom's plan fails to address the root causes of California's housing crisis. Fiscal gimmicks, relying on reserve funds and internal borrowing to close a $12 billion deficit, with analysts warning of a structural deficit of $15 to $20 billion annually through 2028 to 29. Comparing Harris's plan and Newsom's budget. Green energy and climate policy. Harris's plan. Strengths: ambitious, with a clear focus on renewable energy and green jobs. Her plan aligns with California's 2045 carbon neutrality goal and appeals to progressive voters. Weaknesses: high costs could strain state revenues, especially if federal funding decreases under a new administration. Implementation may face bureaucratic and local resistance, as seen with SECA reforms. Voter appeal resonates with younger voters and environmentalists but risks alienating moderates concerned about tax increases or economic disruptions. Newsom's budget. Strengths: pragmatic, leveraging existing programs like cap-and-trade and climate bonds. Focus on wildfire resilience, addresses immediate voter concerns in fire-prone regions. Weaknesses: lacks bold renewable energy investments, potentially ceding leadership to other states. Diverting cap-and-trade funds to firefighting and high-speed rail drew bipartisan criticism. Voter appeal appeals to fiscally conservative voters but risks losing progressives who demand stronger climate action. Analysis: Harris's plan is visionary but risks fiscal overreach, while Newsom's is grounded but incremental. Harris could position herself as a transformative leader, while Newsom's approach reflects the constraints of governing during economic uncertainty, exacerbated by federal policies like tariffs. Affordability and economic equity: Harris's plan. Strengths: directly targets housing, healthcare, and tax relief, addressing voter priorities. Her focus on underserved communities could strengthen her base among diverse constituencies. Weaknesses: ambitious spending may require tax hikes or federal support, both politically contentious. Streamlining SECA could face opposition from environmental groups. Voter appeal. Strong among low-income and middle-class voters but may face skepticism from businesses wary of increased regulation or taxes. Newsom's budget. Strengths: maintains existing affordability programs, e.g., tuition-free community college, housing tax credits, while avoiding major tax increases. Weaknesses: Medi-Cal cuts and limited new housing investments undermine affordability goals. The 8% cut to higher education could harm long-term economic mobility. Voter appeal appeals to moderates but alienates progressive and Latino voters due to healthcare restrictions. Analysis: Harris's plan is more aggressive in tackling affordability but risks fiscal and political feasibility. Newsom's cautious approach preserves stability but fails to address structural issues like housing shortages, with only 100,000 homes permitted in 2024 against a need for 500,000 annually. Fiscal responsibility: Harris's plan. Strengths: leverages federal partnerships and state bonds to fund initiatives, potentially offsetting costs. Weaknesses: relies on optimistic revenue projections and federal support, which may not materialize under a Republican administration. Voter appeal: risky if voters perceive it as fiscally irresponsible, especially after recent deficits. Newsom's budget. Strengths: balances the budget without new taxes, using reserves and cuts to close a $12 billion deficit. Weaknesses: heavy reliance on reserves and one-time savings, e.g., $1.3 billion from MCO tax diversion, delays addressing a structural deficit. Voter appeal appeals to fiscal conservatives but criticized by progressives for cutting social services. Analysis: Newsom's budget prioritizes short-term stability, while Harris's plan bets on long-term economic growth through investment. Both face challenges from California's volatile tax base, reliant on high-income earners and stock market performance. Voter impact and political dynamics: voter priorities in 2026. California voters in 2026 will likely prioritize affordability, high housing costs, median home price $800,000, and living expenses dominate concerns. Harris's housing and tax relief proposals could resonate, but Newsom's track record may give him credibility. Climate and green energy: with wildfires costing $135 billion in 2024, voters demand action. Harris's green energy focus could outshine Newsom's wildfire-centric approach. Healthcare: Medi-Cal cuts in Newsom's budget, especially targeting undocumented immigrants, sparked outrage. Harris's commitment to universal coverage could win Latino and progressive voters. Economic stability: federal policies like tariffs and potential cuts to Medicaid funding create uncertainty. Voters may favor Newsom's fiscal caution over Harris's ambitious spending. Political context. Harris's positioning. As a former vice president, Harris could frame herself as a national leader with California roots, appealing to Democrats seeking bold change. Her absence from a 2025 gubernatorial forum suggests coyness about running, but her name recognition is unmatched. Newsom's legacy. As a lame duck governor, Newsom's influence is waning, but his budget's fiscal discipline could appeal to moderates. His opposition to Proposition 36 and Medi-Cal cuts may alienate some voters. X debates. Online discussions highlight polarized views. Some praise Newsom's pragmatic budgeting, while others criticize his cuts to social services. Harris's potential candidacy generates excitement among progressives but skepticism about her ability to navigate California's fiscal challenges. Expert analysis. Fiscal policy. Gabe Patek, California's legislative analyst, warns of a $15 to $20 billion structural deficit through 2028 to 29. Harris's spending plans would need robust revenue strategies, while Newsom's reliance on reserves is unsustainable. Climate policy. Environmental groups criticize Newsom's diversion of cap-and-trade funds, urging Harris-like investments in renewables. However, experts like Dan DePodwin note wildfires' economic toll, $135 billion in 2024, supporting Newsom's focus on resilience. Housing. Ezra Klein argues California's housing crisis stems from SECA and political inaction. Harris's streamlining proposals align with this critique, but Newsom's incremental funding falls short. Healthcare. Carmela Coyle of the California Hospital Association calls Newsom's MCO tax diversion unlawful, favoring Harris's potential commitment to Medi-Cal. Implications for 2026 electoral dynamics. A Harris-Newsom showdown would pit two Democratic heavyweights against each other, splitting the party. Harris's progressive vision could dominate urban and younger voters, while Newsom's experience might appeal to suburban and moderate Democrats. The Republican candidate, likely emphasizing fiscal restraint, could capitalize on any perceived overreach by either Democrat. Policy legacy. Harris, a successful campaign could cement California as a green energy leader, but failure to manage costs risks voter backlash. Newsom, his budget's fiscal discipline could stabilize the state, but cuts to social programs may tarnish his legacy. Broader context. The 2026 election occurs amid federal uncertainties, including potential cuts to Medicaid and disaster aid under a Trump administration. California's response, whether Harris's bold investments or Newsom's cautious budgeting, will shape its economic trajectory. Conclusion. The hypothetical 2026 showdown between Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom highlights contrasting visions for California. Harris's economic plan, centered on green energy and affordability, offers transformative potential but faces fiscal hurdles. Newsom's $322 billion budget prioritizes stability and wildfire resilience but is criticized for insufficient ambition and social service cuts. Voters will weigh affordability, climate action, and economic security, with Harris appealing to progressives and Newsom to moderates. Expert analysis underscores the need for sustainable revenue to address California's structural deficit and housing crisis. As the 2026 election nears, the debate over these plans will shape the state's future, with affordability and climate policy at the forefront.